New COVID cases have been skyrocketing. States around the country are introducing new restrictions, and even with those new restrictions in place, the next few months look grim. This is a good time to remember that it never needed to be like this. A pandemic could happen in a world dominated by a different economic system, but the way to judge any particular system is by how it handles it when it does happen. And let's be clear, when it comes to COVID, capitalism gets a failing grade. We just got two pieces of good news about the coronavirus pandemic. Pfizer's preliminary findings show their vaccine is 90% effective, and Moderna's is 94.5% effective. If those numbers hold up, that's astonishing. Unfortunately, it looks like the time between now and whenever we do all get vaccinated is going to be really bad. Cases have already been going way up, and as the winter months make it harder to move gatherings outdoors and families come together for Thanksgiving and Christmas, things are likely to go from bad to worse. And even if everything goes well with the vaccines, neither Pfizer nor Moderna is going to have their vaccine ready to be available, produced in large enough quantities that's available to most people until sometime this spring. The months in between now and then could be worse than anything that we've seen so far. The thing is, it never needed to be this bad. Capitalism didn't cause COVID, but if we just say that and leave it there, that's incredibly misleading. Here's an analogy. If lightning strikes a sweatshop where flammable material has been left out everywhere in defiance of any kind of safety precautions, and the workers are locked in during their shifts, and so the fire spreads throughout the factory and kills everyone, it's true that the sweatshop owners didn't cause the lightning strike, but it's not true that they didn't cause the tragedy. Similarly, as the capitalist class around the world has pushed with varying degrees of success to roll back labor unions and social safety nets and extend the market into all areas of life, they've done the pandemic equivalent of filling a factory with flammable material and locking us all inside. It's great that Pfizer and Moderna have developed vaccines. And it's even possible that the pharmaceutical industry will make some breakthroughs in antiviral drugs sometime in the next few months. But why wasn't the industry pouring money into research on respiratory ailments years ago? Were SARS and MERS not big enough warnings? Those are both coronaviruses. And what I'm saying right now is not just Monday night quarterbacking. Scientists have been warning us for 15 years that we need to do the kind of research that would help us develop vaccines for this deadly family of viruses. The problem is not that the people who run these companies are terrible human beings. I mean, I'm not saying they aren't terrible human beings, but that's not the structural issue. The deeper problem, the structural problem, is that since the pharma companies are privately owned entities with shareholders, they have every incentive to prioritize short-term profit over thinking about long-term dangers. Compare that to the Pentagon. I'm the last person who'd ever want to glorify America's imperialist military machine, but it is a fact that because the military is publicly owned, it's planned by Congress, no one blinks at buying a new tank or aircraft carrier that might never get used. The military is lavishly funded and it's equipped to deal with all sorts of unlikely but possible future scenarios. Imagine having a healthcare sector, including the pharma industry, that was run on that model. And if what you're thinking right now is that we can't do that, it would kill medical innovation, think again. As Lee Phillips and Mikhail Rozworski discuss in their excellent book, The People's Republic of Walmart, more than 3/4 of genuinely new drugs, NMEs, new molecular entities, are already developed in one form or another of publicly owned labs. The problem is that the direction of research is not set by public planning. It's easy to think about how the sort of socialist society that we here at Jacobin want to achieve might handle the virus. For example, in an economy where the remaining private sector was dominated by worker-controlled firms, these firms' incentives would be very different when faced with the trade-off between staying open during a pandemic and shutting down for public safety, because unlike The external owners of regular capitalist firms, the people making the decisions, or at least the people who elect the people making the decisions, would be the ones putting their own lives at risk. Now, people of all classes have died of COVID, but poor and working people have died at a vastly higher rate. There's a reason for that. We live in a society where essential workers don't get a vote in their company's decision making. The people who do get to make those decisions are able to take extreme measures to put themselves and their families out of harm's way. Of course, no society that exists in the world today has workers democratically controlling the means of production. Even the societies that exist that are in some significant sense non-capitalist are very far from that sort of model, and their political systems have authoritarian aspects I would not want to replicate. But even there, their COVID report card is far better than ours. Just look at Cuba, a poor and resource-strapped island heavily dependent on tourism. It would be easy to imagine Cuba being a COVID disaster. But according to an NBC article last month, Cuba has made such advances in containing the virus that it's announcing a new normality and starting to let back in some tourists. Its rate of deaths per million is 11. That's 11 deaths per million, compared to 203 for the Dominican Republic and 647 for the United States. How do they do that? Well, here's a direct quote from that article. Cuba's universal community-based healthcare system has contained its outbreak and reduced mortality by hospitalizing all confirmed cases, tracing and isolating their contacts, and applying a raft of therapeutic treatments. Similarly, almost no one dies from hurricanes in that very hurricane-prone island. Their comprehensive all-hands-on-deck hurricane preparedness and evacuation machine is remarkably effective. And here's the thing. There's no reason that we have to be so much more vulnerable to various kinds of disasters in the United States. Our resources dwarf Cuba's. We live in the richest society that's ever existed. If we chose to organize that society on the basis of different principles, we could have even better results here. Hurricanes and viruses would happen, regardless of how we organized our economy. But we don't have to be this vulnerable to either one. Put bluntly, we don't have to live like this.